affiliates and subsidiaries. The conspiracy was part of a larger operation called Project Lakta. Project Lakta included multiple components, some involving domestic audiences within the Russian Federation and others targeting foreign audiences in multiple countries. Internet Research Agency allegedly operated through Russian shell companies. It employed hundreds of people in its online operations, ranging from creators of fictitious personas to technical and administrative support personnel with an annual budget of millions of dollars. Internet Research Agency was a structured organization headed by a management group and arranged into departments, including graphics, search engine optimization, information technology, and finance departments. In 2014, the company established a translator project focused on the United States. In July of 2016, more than 80 employees were assigned to the translator project. Two of the defendants allegedly traveled to the United States in 2014 to collect intelligence for their American influence operations. In order to hide the Russian origins of their activities, the defendants allegedly purchased space on computer servers located here in the United States in order to set up a virtual private network. The defendants allegedly used that infrastructure to establish hundreds of accounts on social media networks such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, making it appear that those accounts were controlled by persons located in the United States. They used stolen or fictitious American identities, fraudulent bank accounts, and false identification documents. The defendants posed as politically and socially active Americans, advocating for and against particular candidates. They established social media pages and groups to communicate with unwitting Americans. They also purchased political advertisements on social media networks. The Russians also recruited and paid real Americans to engage in political activities, promote political campaigns, and stage political rallies. The defendants and their co-conspirators pretended to be grassroots activists. According to the indictment, the Americans did not know that they were communicating with Russians. After the election, the defendants allegedly staged rallies to support the president-elect while simultaneously staging rallies to protest his election. For example, the defendants organized one rally to support the president-elect and another rally to oppose him, both in New York on the same day. On September 13th of 2017, soon after the news media reported that the special counsel's office was investigating evidence that Russian operatives had used social media to interfere with the 2016 election, one defendant allegedly wrote, quote, "We had a slight crisis here at work. The FBI busted our activity. So I got preoccupied with covering tracks together with my colleagues," end quote. The indictment includes 8 criminal counts. Count 1 alleges a criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States by all of the defendants. The defendants allegedly conspired to defraud America by impairing the lawful functions of the Federal Election Commission, the United States Department of Justice, and the Department of State. Those organizations of the U.S. government are responsible for administering federal requirements for disclosure of foreign involvement in certain domestic activities. Count 2 charges conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud by Internet Research Agency and 2 of the individual defendants. And counts 3 through 8 charge aggravated identity theft by Internet Research Agency and 4 individuals. Now, there is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election. I want to caution you that everyone charged with a crime is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in court. At trial, prosecutors must introduce credible evidence that is sufficient to prove each defendant guilty beyond any reasonable doubt to a unanimous jury. The special counsel's investigation is ongoing. There will be no comments from the special counsel at this time. This indictment serves as a reminder that people are not always who they appear to be on the internet. The indictment alleges that the Russian conspirators want to promote discord in the United States and undermine public confidence in democracy. We must not allow them to succeed. The Department of Justice will continue to work cooperatively with other law enforcement and intelligence agencies and with the Congress to defend our nation against similar current and future efforts. I want to thank the federal agents and prosecutors who are working on this case for their exceptional service, and I'll be happy to take a few questions. Jack.
Is there concern that this indictment undermines the outcome of the election?
What I've identified for you are the allegations in the indictment. There's no allegation in the indictment of any effect on the outcome of the election. Jessica.
On page 4 of the indictment, paragraph 6, it specifically talks about the Trump campaign, saying that defendants communicated with unwitting individuals associated with the Trump campaign. My question is, later in the indictment, campaign officials are referenced, not by their name, by campaign official 1 or 2 or 3. Were campaign officials cooperative, or were they duped? What was their relationship with this?
Again, there's no allegation in this indictment that any American had any knowledge. And the nature of the scheme was that the defendants took extraordinary steps to make it appear that they were ordinary American political activists, even going so far as to base their activities on a virtual private network here in the United States. So if anybody traced it back to that first jump, they appear to be Americans. Catherine.
One more question. Have you had any assurances from the Russians that they will provide these individuals for prosecution?
There's been no communication with the Russians about this. We'll follow the ordinary process of seeking cooperation and extradition. Thank you very much.
There you have it. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein saying that the Justice Department has reached the indictments of 13 Russian nationals for conspiracy to defraud the United States, meddling in our election. In this indictment, says it was for the purpose of supporting Donald Trump, disparaging Hillary Clinton, though the Deputy Attorney General was very careful to say there that there's nothing in this indictment alleging that the Russian meddling changed the outcome of the election. I want to talk to our analysts and our correspondents now, starting with Cecilia Vega at the White House. President Trump, Cecilia, has consistently called this a witch hunt, saying it's Democrats looking for an excuse for why they lost the election. He has disparaged in the past the intelligence agency's findings. What does he know about this indictment? Any response so far?
No official response from the White House yet, though, Georgia, a source tells me that we can expect a statement to come relatively soon. We're told also that the president was briefed this morning by the FBI director and by the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein there, so he is up to speed on this. But it's our understanding that this very much came as a big surprise to this White House this morning. I mean, you said it. The president told me right after the election, when I asked him that question in one of his very first press conferences, no one on his team had any contacts with the Russians. You heard Rosenstein say right there were people in the Trump orbit who did have unwitting connections and discussions and contact with the Russians. However, I do think going forward, what we will look at, what we can probably expect to hear from the Trump administration is to hone in on that word unwitting dialogue, unwitting contact. They will say this proves there is no collusion, but what it also proves, something that President Trump has been very, very reluctant to talk about, Russian involvement in this election. There was indeed contact. They played a huge role here. His own intelligence community has been saying this for months, and he has been reluctant to admit that that's the case. It's going to be hard for him to do that now. Let's bring this to our legal analyst now, starting with Dan Abrams on the phone. And Dan, this outlines a fairly sophisticated operation going back a couple of years, as far back as 2014, increasing in work in 2016, even into 2017 after the election.
That's right, but I think that what you heard Mr. Rosenstein leave out was a crucial part of this indictment. He pointed out that there is nothing in the indictment to say that it necessarily impacted the election, but of course that wouldn't be for an indictment, right? An indictment wouldn't lay out, here are the policy impacts or the practical impacts necessarily. What they're talking about is what were the crimes that were committed, not what was necessarily the impact of those crimes. And so when you have him saying that Donald Trump, let me read your section, actually, the relevant section. It says, defendants' operations included supporting the presidential campaign of then-candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaging Hillary Clinton. He left that part out. That's a critical part of this indictment. That was the entire purpose as it shifted in mid-2016. That became the focus of this entire organization. And that's important when evaluating Russian meddling in the 2016 campaign.
An organization spending about $1 million a month, according to the indictment. Also want to go to former Governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, also a former prosecutor. Governor, thanks for joining us today as well. The Deputy Attorney General several times saying nothing in this indictment, stressing in this indictment, shows any knowledge or witting participation by the Trump campaign.
Well, sure, and that's an important point, and that Dan just pointed out. But one thing that Dan didn't talk about in his comment, too, was they also talked about supporting Bernie Sanders. So I think what the real intent of this group by the four corners of the indictment was to disparage Hillary Clinton, was to make sure that Hillary Clinton was not going to be elected president of the United States, and they wanted to make that effort because not only were they supporting Trump and disparaging Clinton, but they were also supporting Sanders, and that's in the indictment as well. I think the other thing to know here now is I think this is the evidence that supports the idea that the Russians were involved. From the indictment, this appears to be a very sophisticated operation that was well-funded, well-financed, well thought out.
And just wanted to disrupt the entire U.S. political system, so distrust in the entire political system. Interesting detail he laid out there. After the election, they supported rallies both supporting President-elect Trump and supporting the protests of Hillary Clinton.
Well, and that's my point, George, is that I think to just focus on the support of Trump, obviously that says so in the indictment, and there were activities and rallies in favor of the president while he was a candidate. But what you also see is that these guys just wanted to make a mess of this whole thing. And that's why they also supported Sanders and disparaged Clinton. They wanted to sow real discontent in the United States and even more anger during this election. And you can see from some of the messages that are detailed in the indictment, that's what they wanted to do. They acted as if they were activists for Black Lives Matter in certain instances and other types of activist groups, even falsely impersonated the Tennessee Republican Party with a Twitter handle that was at TENGOP. These were guys and women who were attempting to really wreak havoc in our political system, and much of it seemed to be focused on making sure that Hillary Clinton was not going to be president.
And you could argue certainly they succeeded in wreaking havoc with our political system. I want to bring in Dan Harris as well, because Dan, for most Americans, we're hearing for the first time in this indictment about a Russian organization called the Internet Research Agency. This is a group you visited in Russia.
Yeah, they have a reasonably nondescript residence where they work out of on the outskirts of St. Petersburg, Russia, an office building. And we tried to go in and were very quickly and angrily expelled from